Okay, I'm going to start off by stitching across the top here, using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. And then trim these threads. What I'm going to do is I'm going to finger press this seam open. And I'm going to stitch across top stitch at 1/8 of an inch. Then set the pocket aside. And now I'm going to stitch my flap. So 1/8 of an inch on the flap. That looks like. All right, so before I go back over to the cutting table, I'm gonna add my brand in right here, and I'm gonna do it about 1/2 inch down from this top seam. This is the best place that I have found to add a tag, so make sure if you're adding a tag to do that before you get too far in sewing. So I realized that I'm crazy. I do actually need to trim this down, because the way that I'm gonna make my flap is I'm gonna get this piece fully, edge coated, geez, before I sew it, so that this section here has a nice pop of color. So I do need to trim this down. And then, yeah, so I'm sorry that I said that earlier. But so I'm gonna trim it down as well as I can. And now if you don't want to edge coat, then you can just skip this step altogether. You can just add glue if you want to remove the idea or remove the possibility of this cork putting off any little frays. You can just glue the edges, but if you're gonna edge coat, you want to do that on this piece now, because you won't be able to reach it any other time. And so I'm just gonna edge coat both the flap and my snap tab at the same time. So then once I get to the installation of them, hopefully they'll be done. Now doing it like this definitely adds more time to this process, so that's just something to consider. If you are just making this for yourself and you want to scooch right along through the video and the construction process, then of course you can skip this top stitch or the edge coating step entirely. I do suggest doing something to finish the edges though, because they will, with repeated use, this raw edge flap is gonna start to show some fraying. Okay, so I've got these two ready. Oh, this is not trimmed down nicely. Okay, there we go. So those two are ready for edge coating. And then while I'm over here, I'm just gonna glue these two together. If you want to, you can just baste them. You can stitch them down. I'm just gonna glue it. And then I'm gonna trim this piece as well. Okay, so those are all done. And so, because this piece is also raw edge, I am going to edge coat this one as well before attaching it to the front exterior panel. Just gonna burn these little fuzzies off. And I'm just gonna do one coat of base coat on this. I'm not gonna do color, just because will really take forever. Ooh, get low on my base coat here. I never used to do this step where I added edge coat or glue to this little piece, but I've just gotten into the habit now of, even if they're single layer cork pieces, I just always add one quick layer of base coat just to seal it off. I do the same thing on my straps, which is why I've been switching over to a 4-fold strap, just because it puts all the raw edges inside. But it's fine. It just adds a lot of time to edge coat the entire strap. Okay, so I'm gonna edge coat the flap and the snap as well. And so now if you just want to seal the edges and you don't care about having color, you could just leave it just like that, which is totally fine. And that'll seal those edges. But we're here now, so I'm just gonna do the full process of adding a color. Okay, so the one coat here that dries pretty quick, so I'm just gonna move right along. So I'm gonna add a little bit of glue here just along this top edge. And I'm gonna line this up by aligning the top edge on a straight line and then centering it on these edges. And then I'm just going to eyeball and make this centered. So at this point it's going 1, 2, 3. It's coming up to the 3.75 line, both of my side edges here. And so I'm just gonna pat that into place. Let that set up for a second. And then now the back bottom, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna add my pocket here and we're gonna baste all of this into place. So again, I wanna make sure that it's even. So I'm gonna line up my edge here and then I'm gonna line up this top edge of my pocket as well. Okay, so I'm just gonna go to the machine, I'm gonna top stitch this piece down and then I'm gonna baste that into place. Okay, so I got this all sewn down And I am going to very carefully pull it back and up and trim this down. Just because whenever we're attaching it to the gusset, this will now makes this piece a single layer of cork instead of having two to ease into that curve. And then we've got this guy. I've got just a little bit of overhang here, so I'm just going to trim that. Okay, so now our back pocket is ready to go. See, so it's not a big back pocket, but it definitely adds just one extra little area. All right, so I'm gonna prep my gusset and my strap anchors so that way we can add our gusset to the front while our flap and snap, while those finish drying, we edge coat those. Where is my, here it is, okay. So for these, I wanna be really careful, and I'm only gonna cut out that one little line that I drew in between my 2 points here. Okay, so that's ready to go. That's where we're gonna slide our recessed strap anchors into. And these are gonna be our strap anchors. And so I'm gonna fold them in. This one was a little bit, so that one, remember one of these I cut, it wasn't quite 2. So this one, so when I'm folding this in to create a 1-inch strap, there's gonna be a gap on this back side, which is totally fine. It's just something that I'm gonna have to be aware of. So I'm just gonna grab my double stick tape and put some on both straight edges, short edge or long edges here. And we're going to fold these in toward the center to make a 1-inch wide anchor. All right, so I'm just gonna pop to the machine and I'm gonna stitch down both long edge here. Okay, got my little strap anchors made, and now I need to grab 2 1-inch rectangle rings. And the way that you do recessed strap anchors is right sides together, slide 1 strap anchor into the opening. And I have a decent amount back here, so I'm going to slide it up to where it's overhanging a 1/4 inch off the top edge. I'm going to do the same for this side. So now what we need to do is we need to go to the machine and we're going to stitch just above this line here on both strap anchor. Okay, so now you take your your rectangle ring, you're going to slide it, and then carefully fold it over, and you're going to tuck it into that same opening. And then pull it down. And voila. Now we have the strap, or the rectangle ring on the recessed strap. Do the same over here, and then I'm gonna rivet it into place. Now the alternative to riveting it is you can stitch right along here if you'd like, but I find that it's perfectly fine and holds more than well enough with rivets. I am going to do 2 just for added security. So use my little template maker here. So this template is from Tops and Bobbins. I think they just rebranded to That Template Shop, if I'm not mistaken. So That Template Shop, this is a By Piera template. So when you navigate to that shop, click on By Piera, and then that is the rivet placement template. Okay, now we need to add our rivets. So I have plenty of room back here with the 3-inch long strap connectors or strap anchors that I could easily add 2 more if I wanted to. Or next time I can just make my strap anchor shorter. I feel like it's just always better to have a little too much than a little too little. That way you have enough room to make changes if you need to. So there we go. My rivets are a little bit wonky, but who cares? Okay, so now we get to add our front panel to our gusset. So I'm just going to mark the center here. So let's see, 10 to 27. I'm not doing quick math very well. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay. Just going to mark my centers on both pieces here. I don't need the center there. I'm just going to mark it along the bottom here. And now, just like with anything else, you're going to match up your center lines, clip into place. If you need to, you can make little snips in your rounded edge for easing it in. And I'm going to sew with my gusset side up, so that's how I'm going to clip. You can also, I guess if I was adding snips, I would add it to my gusset instead of my main panel, actually. If you hear a weird sound, that is the saw. Brandon is back at it, making another shelf for our kitchen. It's got some music playing down there. It was Simon and Garfunkel, always a favorite. All right, so now that we've got this eased in, I'm gonna go to the machine and we're gonna stitch it all the way around. So that's what it looks like now. And so the challenging part of this bag is you top stitch this area here. So you just want to go nice and slow. I'm going to just be finger pressing and kind of pulling a little bit as I'm working my way through these curves down here. You just want to be aware of the curves, because what can happen is you can get little buckles in your gusset down here, and that is what we don't want. We don't want it to, you know, fold over on itself. So just go slow, take your time, and stitch away. If you want to, I guess you could alleviate this, but it does make the front lay really nicely, and it adds a cool little design element. Always a little anxiety inducing, but worth it in the end. See, this makes it such a nice little curved front area.